Hurricane watches are in effect for New England and parts of Atlantic Canada as Hurricane Lee draws closer. Good evening, I'm Mike Nasa with this 11 p.m. Wednesday night update on the tropics. Taking a look at the Atlantic, we have a very large Hurricane Lee that is headed for areas of Bermuda as well as New England. We have Margo out here, which is weakened a little bit, but still a Category 1 hurricane off in the North Atlantic. And we have a new system developing here in the Central Atlantic that could be a hurricane down the road in the Atlantic Basin. But we are going to start with Lee, since that is closest to home. Here's the latest on Hurricane Lee as of 11 p.m. Atlantic time. Lee was at 28.0 north, 67.7 west, winds of 105 miles per hour. So it's no longer a major hurricane, but it's still a very powerful Category 2, and it's moving north at 9. The aircraft flying in there recorded a pressure of about 953 millibars. The track should continue to the north, and then a little jog north-northeast, and then kind of back to the west, and then north again. And it should come ashore as either a hurricane or a strong tropical storm in the area there near Maine and Nova Scotia, right along the coastline there, very close to Atlantic Canada and New England. And for that reason, we have a hurricane watch. A hurricane watch in effect from Stonington, Maine to the U.S.-Canada border, also from New Brunswick to the U.S.-Canada border, and for Nova Scotia from Digby to Medway Harbor. So that's a hurricane watch. We have a tropical storm warning, of course, for Bermuda, because you guys are about to get into tropical storm force winds. And we have a tropical storm watch from Watch Hill, Rhode Island to Stonington, Maine. That includes Block Island, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket. So we've got a lot of wind here headed for areas there of New England and Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada, and this is the reason why. Look at this wind field. Look at how large a hurricane Lee has become. Hurricane force winds now extend out 115 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds 265 miles from the center. Very, very large hurricane. Now, when can we expect these winds? Well, if you're in areas, say, of Cape Cod, it would be sometime overnight Friday, early Saturday when you would be impacted, and then Nova Scotia would be sometime on Saturday because it will eventually accelerate as it moves to the north. Here's the infrared satellite imagery, and again, it's got some problems here with some drier air. It's not a well-defined eye like we saw a few days ago, but it is still bursting, and it is still very powerful with winds well over 100 miles per hour and a very large wind field, as I said before, and that is why it is going to continue to be a threat as it pulls on towards the west-northwest. Here's a look at the water vapor, and I keep mentioning this dry air. It's obviously not the same beast it was a few days ago when it was a Category 5 hurricane, but still, it's spread out, it's large, and it is dangerous. One of the reasons why this keeps weakening is the wind shear. Look at this wind shear out ahead of it. It is very unfavorable for development, and the hurricane's headed right into that as it interacts with the trough off the eastern seaboard. So not only are the waters going to get cooler as it moves to the north, but it's going to have higher wind shear. So that is not favorable for development as the storm moves to the north. Now, these are the European ensembles as of 18Z on Wednesday night, and most of them have a landfall in Nova Scotia there in the Atlantic Canada region, but some have it actually making landfall either as a tropical storm or maybe even a Category 1 hurricane, still a tropical cyclone in Maine. So that would be fascinating if we actually have a landfall of a tropical cyclone along the Maine coastline. We cannot rule that out. Nevertheless, the impacts are going to be widespread with wind and heavy rain. Rainfall could be high. This is going to keep going up through time. The good news is it's not slow moving. They rarely are when they're up here. And so as it jettisons on off to the northeast, the rainfall should be quick. But again, 6 inches just offshore to 10 inches just offshore. So Nantucket, Cape Cod, you guys could get very close to 4 to 6 inches with 2 to 4 inches throughout in other areas. The water rise is going to be a threat. We're going to see water rises of storm surge from areas of Long Island all the way to Chatham, Massachusetts, and those could be up to 3 feet. Areas of Nantucket, 2 to 4 feet. Martha's Vineyard, 1 to 3. Long Island Sound, Narragansett Bay in there. You guys can see water rises as well. The highest seems to be right here around Cape Cod, 2 to 4 feet, as well as Nantucket. So this little area where it kind of sticks off the coast makes itself more at risk for high water rises. Also, all the way through the Maine coastline to the border of Canada, 3 feet of water rises with very heavy crashing waves on top and tropical storm force winds. Stay away from the water, for sure. Now, the area where we could see impact right now, Stonington, Maine here, all the way to the Bay of Fundy. That looks like this is the area where whatever center there is may come ashore. But remember, we're not going to be dealing with a tightly coiled tropical Florida-type hurricane. This thing's going to be spread out. It's going to be more like a tropical low, like a gale center, like a nor'easter almost. And so the impacts will be widespread. But as far as the quote-unquote center, yes, it could come in Bar Harbor, St. Andrews, St. John, in the Bay of Fundy, near New Brunswick there, and Nova Scotia. You guys are really in for it, although we cannot rule out a direct impact to Maine. The key messages for Hurricane Lee: number 1, tropical storm conditions, heavy rainfall, and high surf for Bermuda. This will begin early Thursday, so just in a few hours, and a tropical storm warning is in effect for Bermuda. Number 2, the hurricane conditions and coastal flooding are possible for eastern Maine, southern New Brunswick, and western Nova Scotia on Saturday, and the hurricane watch, as I mentioned, is issued for that area. Heavy rainfall, you could have urban and small stream flooding throughout the weekend, and that's always a concern. Even with fast-moving storms, the heavy rainfall can really douse you. Number 3, there is the potential for life-threatening storm surge southeastern Massachusetts, including Cape Cod and Nantucket, and they have a storm surge watch in effect in that area. So listen to local officials and stay away from the water. And tropical storm conditions are possible over a large portion of coastal New England, including Cape Cod, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, Block Island, and portions of Atlantic Canada. We have a tropical storm watch for that area. So again, a lot to deal with Hurricane Lee. It's going to be something to watch here. We continue to see it just kind of spin, but there's a lot of energy with it as it moves slowly to the north. It will eventually pull to the northeast and out, but not before having an impact there to areas of New England. Margo is still a hurricane. It had been up to 90 miles an hour. It's weakening somewhat. 35.2 north, 40.5 west, moving north at 7. It should remain a hurricane for a day or so and then weaken to a tropical storm, but really just meander out here for the next 5 days and not be a problem for anybody. Here's Margo on the satellite. Doesn't look that good. It's trying to burst, but it looks like it's just getting a little bit of shear and just kind of disheveled appearance, so not that great. Looks like it might not become a Category 2 hurricane after all, but it's going to stay out there for a while, hopefully away from the Azores. They won't have to deal with anything from it. Now, when we look at the Central Atlantic and the Eastern Atlantic, here is our invest area we've been watching. There were the 2 invests that kind of merged together, and we've got another wave leaving Africa. So the African wave train is very active this year. Now, the great news about this one is it looks like Lee and like the others, it will probably head out away from the islands, away from Bermuda, away from the Bahamas, and we won't have to deal with it. The GFS ensembles, some of them make it a very strong hurricane. So don't be surprised if this becomes a hurricane or even a major hurricane. But the good news is it should turn out. But again, that's a long way away. We don't have a definitive center to track yet, but we're going to watch it. The ensemble models, they seem to want to take the system generally to the north, although these are the GFS ensembles kind of showing a little bend to the west. A lot of them actually are bending it west at the end. So we'll keep an eye on that because this is kind of, it's turning out, and then they kind of jettison back west there. So we're going to watch it. We'll see if anything develops, and then some of the models showing another system behind it. And as we get later through September, we'll start to look to the Caribbean. This is the area in later part of the year where we look for hurricane development. But right now, very active in the Atlantic. We were watching our 2 hurricanes, Margo and Lee. Margo, not a threat to land. Lee is going to bring impacts of high surf, storm surge, and bad, nasty winds to areas of New England and Atlantic Canada. I'm Mike Naso with the latest on Hurricane Lee. Stay tuned. I'll talk to you next time.